Good morning, everybody. The title of this is Separating the Signal from the Noise. But ultimately, it's really about, do we understand disruption and are we ready for it? I experienced some disruption myself this morning. Anyone fly into LaGuardia? I learned as I got there, talk about customer service, that there was no longer a taxi stand at Terminal C. And so they shuffled me onto a bus and told me about all the great things that they're doing to improve capability over the next 3 years, and then dropped me off at Terminal A with the announcement, oh, by the way, you're now half a mile closer to Manhattan. Is that disruption? Is that what we're looking for? Because I was truly disrupted. Added some new technology. It was a shuttle bus, but obviously not where we want to go. So separating the signal from the noise. There is a lot of things happening in this industry today. There's a lot of great opportunity. You know, we just heard from sort of the things going on, and all of us can cite multiple examples within our own carriers with what we're reading today in this very newspaper live feed across the industry. But the real question is, how is it impacting our customers, our top line, our bottom line, and improving the capabilities of our industry as a whole? Great quote from Ernest Hemingway, and I won't read it to you, but the question is, are we prepared? Or will we be surprised? And it's not just other carriers in this room, right? We'll call that co-opetition. We're all sitting in here and sharing meals and sharing conversations, but it's about third parties. It's about disintermediation. It's about the value of your relationship with your insurance company, who, again, you know, to use the example you just heard, you know, as an insurance buyer, I tend to deal with once, maybe twice a year. I have to renew, and thank God my mortgage company takes care of my home, right? So I just have to sometimes deal with my auto, and then occasionally I have a claim. How's that for a relationship? I spend more time with my wife. So something, you know, I just want everyone to think about from that perspective, and do you really know where you are on that curve? Speaking of curves, I expect most folks have seen something along these lines, right? The innovation curve, the opportunity for disruption. And for those of you who can't find insurance, need to learn how to use the buttons. Oh, no laser pointer on this one. You can see insurance. We're there in the bottom left. Good news, we're ahead of energy and healthcare and life sciences. Not sure how much you read about those guys. We're still on the flat part of the curve. There's a lot of opportunity. And the question really comes to, how do we introduce capability, leverage disruption, and how relevant is it to our buyers? Be it insureds, be it brokers, be it agents, be it the industry as a whole. And if you look at others, like in banking and in capital markets, right, they're further along, and we obviously have the consumer retail space further ahead of us. Those are the guys we need to be watching. And we'll come back to this topic in a minute. We're on the flat side of the curve, but that doesn't mean we're not doing anything. And so I don't want anyone to think that, right? Analytics practically originated in insurance. I mean, people talk about risk. We have actuaries that measure it on a daily basis. We really understand what it is and how it operates. Digital distribution. Who remembers back in the 90s when we started to talk about direct insurance? It was very exciting back then. Now it's everywhere, right? And it's become table stakes. Intelligent automation, new products. We look at Trove, we look at Lemonade, we look at Slice. We're offering those new capabilities, but ultimately, we are still operating at the fringe of the opportunity set. I thought about this the other day, that as I was looking for examples, I was with a large client with their leadership team, and they wanted to talk about digital insurance. Two words that sort of always make me laugh a little bit. And really what it means and how it's impacting the industry. And I have lots of examples, but when I look at the impact of those examples from a revenue standpoint, from a pushing the dime standpoint, they're all very small. And again, I'll accept the challenge, and you obviously have an opportunity to ask me questions. All of you are working on something of this sort. The question is, when does it become mainstream, and when does it actually start to move the dime? $300 million investment in Lemonade this morning. That's fantastic. And I've had some conversations with Dan Schreiber about sort of what that platform is. But today, where it stays in the area of renter's insurance and the area of sharing reserves and profits, it's a fantastic story. But is it changing the industry? Absolutely not. Right? We look at other larger investments, Blackboard at AIG, Bright House, the spinoff of retail business at MetLife. How are they pushing the agenda? And so that, to me, is where we sit today, is we're on the curve, still somewhat flat, but the question is, where do we go from here? How do we create impact, and what do we do? And so you can see some other opportunities, other things we're all working on. We all have great stories. We're all investing it. Some have even moved it out of the innovation groups into a business area. Maybe it's our new platform for pet insurance, right? Or maybe it's dealing with a small section of our brokerage business associated with aircraft leasing. But it's about getting to the core. And so I asked the question, where do we go from here? Do we go to a place where we lose that role? Where we become the TPAs, the capital investments. Nothing wrong with being an investment manager and a capital manager, but ultimately, is it possible that we take a second seat? And as Tesla is doing in China, right, where they're incorporating insurance policies into the purchase of the car, do we become the TPA? Do we sort of lose that relationship and really operate more in the back office and the back end? Do we achieve what we're all looking to achieve, right? New risk at scale, personalized bespoke insurance products, the Shangri-La, the value proposition, the relevance to our customers that we want to see and hear? Or ultimately, do we just stay along the same pace we've stayed on for almost 200 years? One of the oldest industries in the United States at a minimum, right? Number 2 on the New York Stock Exchange. We've done a great job. We've weathered storms, right? We've had low profit years. We've had years where we've relied on capital. Everyone still needs insurance. But where does this industry ultimately go, and what happens with it as a whole? This is a slide, hopefully you can read these, of all the great innovation that's been introduced in the last couple of years. And I was going through slide decks back to 2014, 2015, and my God, my PowerPoint skills have gotten better, or someone's has. But ultimately, we have introduced a lot of capability, a lot of innovation. And if you look at the adoption timeline and the potential impacts, when I look at what I was predicting in 2015 or 2016, we frankly have not achieved most of those things, right? The autonomous vehicle will have a significant impact on all of us by 2020, right? That wasn't my prediction. That's a prediction that's all over the papers. Where is that autonomous vehicle impact, right? I was with a client the other day, and they said, my Tesla is still having a problem when there's a white car in front of me about braking. That's not driving the autonomous sort of innovation. So there are great things out there. The world is filled with proof of concepts, great expectations, and a lot of failures. And those impacts are still not where we expect them to be, and frankly, where we need them to be. And always interested in any of your feedback or cries of bullshit, if you will, but just one man's point of view across the board here. So what do we focus in on? This is a recent Celent survey, and you can see that there are 3 large drivers, there are others, that are driving this industry and our ability to grow. Customer expectations, 56%, absolutely where it should be, if not higher. It is all about the customer and the relevancy. Data, we'll talk about that. We are, as the old saying goes, data rich and information poor. And how do we leverage that data, right? We've been doing analytics forever. The question, as I go in and I talk to business leaders about their science groups and their 200 PhDs and folks that I struggle to have conversations with, is they're giving me good information, but A, is it relevant to what I'm doing? And B, do I believe them? And those struggles still exist. I'm starting to see more and more progress in that space. And the answer is we're getting more micro about the questions we're asking and figuring out how to leverage that in a further fashion. And lastly is a competition for talent. Who wants to work for an insurance company? I do, but my kids don't. It's funny as I talk to carriers, so much time is now being spent on sort of how do we bring people in and how do we retain them. And very often, as companies find, it isn't about having an office in Midtown Manhattan. It's very often not about having an office in Bloomington, Illinois, right? Or places like that. And so how do you get them in? How do you get them excited? And how do you retain them? And so those three aspects, customer, data, and talent, I would argue are the three key points of light, the three foundations of our success and our future ability to grow this industry and stay relevant. I like to set a slide, this graph on the left, and I use it quite a bit. But if you go further into the sell-in study, what's probably more relevant is what this doesn't show you. Who's this compared against? And so what you see here is we're still looking inwardly. We're comparing ourselves 64% of the time to other insurance companies. We're not spending as much time looking at what the rest of the world is doing, what our customers are looking at. Because they're not looking at AIG versus MetLife versus Hartford. They are for a price purpose. But in general, what they're looking at is how do I buy my shoes? Or how do I buy that next book or that service I want? And so that's really where our competition is coming from, right? Back to being the TPA, right? We could operate in the background. We could run the risks. We can have the actuaries and do the underwriting. But ultimately, to provide true customer service, we need to change who we are and how we operate. A partner of mine often talks about being the Jetsons at home and the Flintstones at work. I'm sure he didn't make that up, but I like it. And it really is part of the challenge. And the same challenge exists for our customers. If I can get anything else I need quickly, easily, and almost proactively, why is it often so hard to get insurance? Why do I still have to go give blood and get on a scale? Why do I still have to prove that I have my registration for my auto and have even a drone come and inspect my roof, right? How do I get better at those things? So let's jump to data. Data is at the heart of everything we do. And every time a client talks to me about automation and artificial intelligence and new capability, it comes back to data. They don't always want to have that conversation. But if your data isn't good, as the saying goes, garbage in, garbage out, right? And so the question is, do we understand the relevancy of our data, what we have, and how to leverage it? And as we do start to understand that, using claims as an example here, there's clearly information we have about the agent, about first notice of loss, loss runs, policy validation. But the real question is, are we leveraging everything available to us? Okay? How are we using third-party data? How are we accessing the same world that everybody else lives in to move into that world and to understand real-time what's going on and to build models? We're great at models. God knows how much storage we spend on actual data models. But how do we start to bring that back into the forefront of our underwriting, of our sales and marketing, and ultimately our claims and fraud and adjudication processes? Okay? These are some of the disruptors that will change how we operate and will start to really define who the leaders are and the survivors in the future. Talent being the third pole. Just some stats to depress you a little bit here. This is from a recent KPMG HR study. Unemployment is at the lowest level. It will rise again, right? We're going to change curves. But are we picking the right people? Do we understand enough about where we're going and who we want to be to both develop the folks we have, but more importantly, to hire and retain the folks that we do not have? It is a challenge. It is a real challenge to make sure that we are building everything we do on the people. A couple of years ago, KPMG put out a study called The Rise of the Machines, and we talked about automation and the elimination of, low-value processes and all that. And it's great stuff, and it still holds true today. Ultimately, it isn't driving cost savings, it's driving efficiency. Those aren't synonymous, right? We may find that a call center rep is now 30% more efficient. Well, what do we do with that 30% is really the question. And so we put out a study last year, which I thought was very tongue-in-cheek, and I liked it quite a bit, called Rise of the Humans, right? We're coming back around. Because it isn't about the folks that we ultimately determine we no longer need or the processes we no longer need. It's the people we do need. It's the folks who are calling themselves innovators in that slide we had up earlier. It's the underwriters who are interacting with our insureds and our brokers and our agents. It's the claims handlers who are figuring out what to pay and what may look fraudulent and how to build customer loyalty, right? Those are the pieces that we actually need to get our arms around. And so, that stat in the middle there, employers in Europe and North America, 16 to 18 million more college-educated workers. Obviously, that's not just for insurance, but we're not necessarily building those people. And frankly, we're not doing enough to encourage them to come into insurance. We need to do more. This is what will drive the disruption. I look around the room, and you're all very good-looking people, but ultimately, it's the next generation that's going to help us to drive those things. And it hurts me to say that as a 50-year-old, because I feel like I'm 27. And just something I just want everyone to see and to be aware of, particularly as you listen to the conversations today about what we're doing and where we're heading. So just in summarizing, relevance versus time. Where do we go? Anticipating change, responding to change, ignoring change. Who are you? Who is your company? What are you trying to do? Do you anticipate that change and transform at the core? We've done it at the periphery. How do we bring it home and change the culture and the adoption of the organizations as a whole? Are we second movers? Nothing wrong with that sometimes, right? Not everyone wants to be a Geico or a Progressive. Ultimately, I'm not sure if those are insurance companies or marketing companies any longer. But how do we leverage fast follow capabilities? And again, I would challenge, it's not just about what other insurance companies are doing. Because I can promise you that the Amazons and the Googles are not waiting to see what the insurance companies do, right? Neither are the Vanguards and the Fidelities of the world. So it's a challenge from that perspective. Or is it business as usual? There's plenty of people out there. There's a lot of existing life insurance and annuities policies, right? And so we're taking revenue off of that. We're still investing in a low interest marketplace. Where do you ultimately go? And I go back to the first question I asked, how did you go bankrupt? It's not all bad news. This was a study of about 300 chief innovation officers, R&D leads, strategy leads. And for the last 10 years or so, these numbers hadn't moved very much. Where did you focus your innovation? Right? 70% incremental. Translation, little bits and pieces, right? It's not the end-to-end process, it's that specific process. And boy, we're much better now at getting the photos uploaded from that first notice of loss in an auto claim. But ultimately, did it change the end-to-end claims experience? Adjacent, right? And then, more importantly, 10% is transformational, right? Literally changing processes, core functions, and operate. In the last year, however, we've started to see a shift in this. Reduced incremental spend. Doubling the transformational spend. This is what we need. If we want to transform, we're going to do this at our core. We're going to make bets. There's a great Harvard Business Study article, it's probably now 10 or 15 years old, that talks about how do you change a passive-aggressive organization. I realize none of you work for passive-aggressive organizations, but I'll use it as an example. And the answer is change everything at once. Because if you don't, you give everyone a foothold to stay in the future, in the past or the current. And so therein lies the challenge. And clients ask me all the time about becoming a digital insurer, right? It's how do you change who you are in a manner that doesn't allow people to stay rooted in where they are, but takes your organization, your customers, and your future into tow. And so with that, I'll pause. I'm at the end of my time, but I'll leave you with this one thought from William Gibson. It's all there, right? We can all talk about examples. We can all talk about success cases. The question is, what are you doing about it? So thank you very much for your time.